ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons. Hey, this is Arlene. We are back again with more discussion at Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing today in our ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue. We have someone all the way from Indonesia. His name is Lukman Hakim, or fondly called Uki. He's with me now on Skype. We're going to discuss about Indonesia's budget transparency. So how does Indonesia fare among Southeast Asian countries, obviously? We have Lukman Hakim, or Uki. He's a researcher. He was formerly with FITRA. FITRA is Indonesia Forum for Budget Transparency, and he is a lead researcher for the Open Budget Survey. Hi, how are you?
Hello, Arlene. I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
Oh, I'm great as well. It's great to have a conversation with you all the way from Indonesia. So, of course, with you, I've only know you from someone that has been doing budget transparency and open budget survey for quite some time. So it's great to have you to talk about how Indonesia is faring in terms of transparency and accountability in its budget expenditure and budget planning. Maybe a bit of background about the organization that you were with, FITRA, and also about the work that you had done or are currently doing with the open budget survey.
Yes, I'm right now currently with FITRA. It's the Indonesian Forum for Budget Transparency. It's an organization that was established in 2002. It was we had in 1998 we had a reform, sort of like a big, not quite a revolution yet, but it was a big call for the leaders and also the citizens of Indonesia.
What year was that, by the way?
Hello?
What
Yes?
year was that? The starting of the Indonesian Forum for Budget Transparency?
No, I didn't actually, because I think I was in junior high school at the time.
Oh, really?
So I wasn't at it. Yeah. But I was quite close with some of the founders once I actually get into an NGO, and many of them are right now already within the politics themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because there was a call out for the decentralizations, and also obviously there will be some money going from the central government to the local government. Therefore, there has to be an organization from civil society that's trying to monitor those money, and the FITRA was established to respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined the FITRA in 2010, and I think there has already been some research that I've already been doing with FITRA, also with other organizations, because I'm also helping to mainstream the budget issues. And since I'm also working in other issues as well, not just in budget sector, but also in gender and sexuality, I'm also helping those organizations in trying to achieve those goals using instruments of politics and budgeting as well, the budgeting process, because it would be much easier for them to advocate
But why?
on those avenues.
But why budget transparency? I'm just curious because isn't it enough for the government to table the budget in the parliament and get the approval from other parliamentarians? Why we need to monitor and to ensure there is a budget transparency, especially from the civil society perspective?
That is actually, budget transparency is one of the calls in 1998, because at the time, Indonesian debt at the time was becoming increasingly huge. So nobody knows how it is. Everything looks fine with Suharto and everything, but somehow suddenly Indonesia's debt was like increasing multiple folds, because rupiah went down and US dollars were getting stronger towards rupiah, and since our debt are mostly in US dollars, therefore the amount of money that we need to pay was increasing multifolds, and nobody knows about this. And then there was a monetary crisis, and everyone was panicked, and so they demand some transparency for the budget system. And then they found out there's a lot of mismanagement in the accounting system for the Indonesian budget, and one of them was that they put debt as a part of revenue instead of the financing sector.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the things. Why is it important right now to have budget transparency? Because it doesn't work previously with during Suharto, where everything about the budget is being closed off.
Mm. So I mean, right after Suharto was toppled, I would assume that transparency and accountability would be the focus of government. Oh, sorry, of leaders. Post Suharto, would that be the case? Do you think that post Suharto it was still the same kind of like secrecy and a lot of mismanagement and also corruption in terms of the funds and the budget itself?
Well, it wasn't immediate. After the 1998 reform, talk about transparency was still established within the government and also within the legislative, but it wasn't immediate. I think the monumental shift actually starting in 2002, where discussion on the access to information law was starting at the time, but the legislative was sort of like hesitating on trying to implement this. I mean, you can't really change decades of law just like that within a year, even though if there's a big reform opportunity ahead of the activists. But it's quite difficult to change, and it requires several laws until you can see some improvement. I think the biggest improvement starting in 2008. Many of the budget documents have been started to. You can see from the open budget survey that has been done in 2006. In 2010 survey, which is about the 2008 budget, is they put more documents on it, and that was open to the public, but not just the documents to the public. We also have the access to information law, which is very, very important. Yeah, it's very slow, but once it already gains some sort of a momentum, and then it will speed up immediately.
Interesting. For your organization, what are the key or highlights, the kind of research that you have done so far, or I mean, or your colleagues have done so far that is worth mentioning in terms of pushing forward towards a more transparent budgeting?
Our organization is doing research-based advocacy, and we're sort of like well known among the people that, and also by the media, that we're sort of like a watchdog that keep going in the media, and not a lot of politicians actually like it because we keep calling them names in in the media. Yeah, and but that's actually one of the important things. There's still a lot of although the budget documents is out there and it's open, but many of the accounts are like very vague in wording. Like you don't really know whether something is actually for a renovation of the toilet at the legislative building, which is 20 billion, but you can't see it immediately. So sometimes we call out what exactly this is this item in the budget means. So we call them out, and we made some campaigns if there are if we found some mismanagement, or we found like a mark up within the budget themselves.
But how
we call them out.
Sorry to interrupt, but how do you differentiate between mismanagement of funds or corruption against really bad business decision in terms of expenditure or planning, budget planning? Because the officers can always say, oh, we are just terrible business person when it comes to like giving a price for certain goods or certain items to purchase. So how do you differentiate?
Yeah, that is actually one of the most difficult things. We do have a corruption eradication commission that's sort of like trying to monitor the budget whether there's an indication of corruption. But one of the primary indicators of whether it's a corruption or not is that if there's some sort of indicators that that there's some sort of a personal gain from that budget. For example, the winner from the procurement is actually a relative of them, those kind of things, or a markup that was higher than the normal market price. And how do we differentiate that? If there's a procurement, we check whether the market price is actually close to the bidding or not, whether the price is actually quite similar or maybe just a little bit less. Less is better, but most of the time it's always increasing, because those who are doing the bidding in the procurement are relatives from the government, and so they thought that no matter how much money that they could offer, the government will always accept it. And there's also that, and we also check with the auditors, the state auditors. Sometimes we have the state auditors if there's some sort of a finding that they got about misadministration or mismanagement. We help them in trying to inform that to the public as well, because we have more power at the media.
This is just a side news that I just found online about governor's pay. Of course, when you talk about budget transparency, you focus mainly on the budget that the government tables every fiscal year. But when it comes to like other kind of expenditure, let's say the pay of a governor or the prime minister, or sorry, the president and its ministers, do you monitor that area as well? Because I found a news, apparently in 2012 you guys did a study that revealed astonishing levels of pay for governors, and you also mentioned about Joko Widodo. At that time he was still the governor of Jakarta, and apparently he's not getting as much I would say pay compared to other governors. With the high pay of ministers in Singapore's administration, don't you think having high pay for Indonesian governors is something justifiable?
Yeah, I think we got a big flag from when we were sort of like making that release, because there is a very big difference in Indonesia about salary and the take-home pay. So government officials, including governors and also the mayor, receive salary. And Jokowi at the time was announcing that they're not going to accept their salary and everything. But for us, the salary it's sort of like when you got income from your company. There's salary, but there's also benefits and also bonuses and everything. The salary for civil servants are actually quite small, especially for a governor of Jakarta was only about 6 million rupiah, so about around 550 US dollars. So around that. However, the take-home pay, the amount of money that they got from the benefits and from the bonuses by the end of the year was actually huge, could actually lead to billions of rupiah. And those are not the ones that was being those are not the ones that was it wasn't being in target. Everyone just keeps saying that, oh, my salary is small and everything. Yeah, your salary is small, but all the other revenues other than your salary is actually quite big. And there was a lot of civil servants officials that was sort of like against our publications, and we criticized Jokowi about it as well, because he keeps saying I'm not about the salary thing as well. But I think we do believe that's so there's a train. Yeah, I'm living quite close to the action here. So but it's sort of like it's like kind of like fooling the public about it, because there's a huge amount of money. But Jokowi is the largest because some of the bonus that is head of the subnationals received are coming from a certain percentage from the state revenue, from their not state revenue, subnational revenue, and then Jakarta actually quite big.
One question, I'm just curious, very curious, because I want to compare how the experience of Malaysian and Indonesia, if there's a comparison towards it. In Indonesia, are all the politicians or people within the government, they are obliged to state how much their income is, how much their bank accounts statement is? Are they obliged to do that? Because in Malaysia, it's still very much not something that is part of the law. Like we wouldn't know how much a governor or sorry, not a governor, but how much the minister would make in some probably maybe in terms of just the income, that the similar situation that you mentioned about Jokowi when he was the governor of Jakarta.
Yeah, there is an obligation to register your assets to the government, to the corruption. few of them have been announcing to the public. In fact, the legislators right now, there's only, I think there's a new legislators coming in around October, and up until November, there's only 2 legislators that actually have already announced the public. Not to mention that the Corruption Eradication Commission was sort of have a very limited capacity, and they need to make some investigation, and they could make the investigations one at a time. So even though there is that obligation, but it's very difficult for the public to get those informations at all from either from the government or even expecting them to announce it, because the obligation was just for them to register it to the government.
And you actually, for your organization FITRA, you actually did a research on this, like how easy or how difficult for the public to access information about the budget, about how much their minister or governors are earning. What was the outcome?
So that was actually a very long time ago, but now it's actually now it's actually getting easier. At the time, the information was being closed off. One of the things, because in our tax law, tax information about individuals are not just individuals but also companies. All tax information, all the data about the taxes are sort of closed off. So you can check out the numbers of assets that they got, but that may not be the whole complete information. You need to see about their tax information to find out how much they're actually paying as tax to know whether how much revenue that they actually got, how much asset that they also receive from them, their families, and also their colleagues. However, that information was being closed off to the public because of the law. But currently, there has been already some changes. But the law has not changed yet. But somehow there's our constitutional court made additional explanation that you can actually be made to the public with the permission from the tax owners, and many officials, including legislators and also officials from the government, from the executives, are sort of have their own initiatives to announce themselves to the public how much they own and how much exactly the money that they pay into their tax.
Mm-hmm. We will take a short break. When we return, more discussion about Indonesia's budget 2015 as well as budget transparency. What's up for that? ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons. Hey, you're back again with Arlene and of course with our guest of today for our ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, Lukman Hakim from FITRA, a researcher on the Open Budget Survey. And of course, today we're going to continue our discussion on the Indonesia's budget transparency, how much they have fared. So continuing our discussion from where we left out just now, I want to know what is your opinion about the current budget 2015 that Indonesian government has tabled a couple of months ago?
It's interesting in 2015 budget because it's sort of 2015 budget was made by the end of 2014, which is a transitional era from Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono to Jokowi. Mm-hmm. So you would expect the 2015 budget to have more Jokowi's programs, but somehow it was disappointing.
Oh, really?
The budget was not really that good. I mean, the amount is increasing, but there was a lack of transparency as well. There was
what do you mean by a lack of transparency in terms of what area that they are not really clear of?
Well, the documents are being released during the drafting of the budget, but somehow there are lots of information that was not within that document and was also not publicized as well. Like how much is the budget according to the expenditure according to the economic classifications, which involves about how much for capital expenditure, how much is for goods and services expenditure, and when you check the document, it's all filled with narratives that was sort of like what are they trying to do, what they want to do, and also the number is increasing or decreasing, and that's it. And the document itself was not was not really that as much as the previous budget year. So there was a lot of information that was being withheld. We don't know why it was being withheld until we got to the legislators. The legislators also did not ask about why there's not a lot of information in it. And then suddenly, within the legislative discussion, there was a lot of meetings that was being closed off to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the meetings that was sort of like in the agenda was talking about the budget, but somehow they did not talk about the budget at all.
I see.
So, yeah, it's like the government, the Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono government was just proposing a certain budget, and then it's like they already make some sort of a okay with it outside of the of the parliamentary building, and they just immediately enacted it. It's like they're playing cat and mouse with Jokowi, because Jokowi is going to be inaugurated in October.
So they are actually sabotaging Jokowi, I suppose. What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't call it sabotaging, but somehow many of the programs that was expected from Jokowi was not existed in 2015 budget, and the legislators, I think they, I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or not, but there are a lot of things within that budget that many of the Jokowi program could actually get to the 2015 budget, but did not. I mean, because I think you said it earlier before the sessions. There was one of the difficulties for Jokowi is actually to deal with the current parliament, because the majority is coming from the opposition parties.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, political dynamics aside, like whether they are not happy with each other, that's another thing. But when it comes to budget transparency in the long run, has Indonesia improved? Because people have high hopes on Jokowi. That's one thing, and another thing is he promised to transform structurally the politics and economy of Indonesia. Has he really kept his promise so far?
Well, many of his promises right now, since he's unable to do anything until at least during the first 6 months, because as I said before, the budget was made by Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, is unable to be changed because it's already being enacted. However, it could be revised within the next 6 months.
So that is what he's focusing right now for Jokowi?
Yes, exactly. For Jokowi right now, he made a lot of plans on trying to change many of the structures of the 2015 budget in the revised budget. So he's planning to improve a lot of money for infrastructure, which is probably the main reason why the fuel subsidy was cut for a little bit.
And a lot of people are unhappy about it when the fuel subsidy was being cut.
The controversy of a fuel subsidy have already been existed since the Sugeng Suharto era. Even the Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono once made a cut to the fuel subsidy twice during his tenure, during his leadership. So it has always been an unpopular decision. One of them is because when you made the cut, it affects not just like a group of people that were sort of like using cars and everything, but also those who are in the village who rely on their on transportation of their products to the market using cars, and it will affect them as well. The prices will increase, so it is always important.
When it comes to budget transparency in Indonesia, you said it's probably getting a bit better. But when it comes to the release of important or key documents, I think if I'm not mistaken, there are 8 key documents that the government needs to release out to the public and make it transparent, especially when it comes to budget, its own annual fiscal year budget. Has the Indonesian government give a better example among Southeast Asian countries as a more progressive one in terms of transparency?
Yes, so there are 8 documents that need to be published. The first one is about the pre-budget statement, which consists about sort of like a generic summary of government policies and budgets. The second one is the executive budget proposal. It's the document that you send to the legislators for approval. The third one is the enacted budget, is the legal instrument authorizing the executive to raise revenues, expenditures, and debts. Another one is the INI report. It's sort of like a realization report that was done periodically within the implemented budget year. Another one is the mid-year review. So you have to review within the year of the budget because there might be some changes within the macroeconomic assumptions. Another one is the year-end report. And the last one is the audit report.
I don't think Malaysia would fare as better when it comes to releasing all the documents. For Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken, we only released 3 of the 8 documents. But how do we fare in terms of budget transparency among all the other Southeast Asian countries?
Well, the score of Malaysia in the last Obud budget survey is 39, which is actually the third best in Southeast Asian countries.
The third
much
worst
better
or
than
the third best? Are you saying the third best?
Yeah, the third best in
That's interesting.
Southeast Asian country. But although it's third best, there's not really a lot of Southeast Asian countries that was being surveyed. So the Open Budget Survey did not make a survey in Singapore, Brunei Darussalam, and also Laos. So even though there's only 3 documents, but within the document there's a very high information. So those are the difference between that and Indonesia. For Indonesia, although they released many of the documents, but if you check the survey at the internationalbudget.org, is that many of the information was sort of like incomplete, so many of the narration within the budget document was not like, for example, the number of programs available in the budget documents was not complete. They only put 5 for every ministry. So
it's a case of half-baked work. Like they have all the information, but not entirely all of them are detailed.
Yes, and it's still happening even until 2015 budgeting. It actually got worse. Although all the documents have been released out now. If you go to our Ministry of Finance website, you can check almost all the budget documents available. All the 8 budget documents are now already released to the public. In fact, for they also have an Excel file for the budget realization every year for the subnational governments as well. So they are improving. Right now, I think they're leading right now on budget transparency. But as I said, if it's only about checklists on what are the documents that needs to be published, they are actually able to do it. But whether the quality of the information available within the documents, now that's another story.
And
Hello?
I mean, besides in terms of the checklist of document by the federal government, what about in terms of local governors or local government? Because if you look at, I'm on I think a research that your organization submitted in terms of local budget management transparency index. It seems like different areas or different region of Indonesia have different level of budget transparency, from probably 80% in certain villages to or certain area to only less than 30%. So there's a huge disparity here.
Yeah, I think the last one was about in 2010. At the time, within the subnational government, there wasn't really a lot of issues about transparency at the time. So the issues about transparency was mostly about Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and its central government, because they signed international initiatives such as Open Government Partnership, and also trying to get more funding from the World Bank. They need to improve their budget transparency. But the subnational government at the time, the issue of transparency was not really popular, and so by doing that local budget index, we actually put mainstreaming those issues of local budget transparency to more government.
So, Lukman Hakim, I have a final question to you regarding on the budget transparency. I guess my final question to you would be on the way forward, because I mean, like you said earlier, you can have checklists, you can fulfill all the eight documents required for a government to be deemed as transparent towards its citizen. But at the end of the day, managing this budget are more important to ensure that there are no corruption, and there's a reduce in mismanagement, and also to have accountability. Like when you say you're going to spend this much, that means you are going to spend this much, and you're not going to ask for more money to cover up. What's next? How your organization FITRA, as well as Civil Society of Indonesia, is going to push forward for the government to be more accountable to its citizen?
I think there's quite a lot of tasks that NGOs in Indonesia needs to do, but mostly about in subnational transparencies instead of the central government. I think the benchmarking in the central government was actually already there's already a lot of organizations that advocate for budget transparency. The Ministry of Home Affairs have already released regulations, and so we're trying to push for more transparency into the deepest level, and so that the public could also see even the physical evidence of invoices, and also we could also be engaged with the government during the procurement. So it's not just the government doing procurement, but there will also be some independent civil society sitting as the committee for the procurement. So those are the things that we're going to push, and Jokowi is planning to have a law on e-government, which is very good. The e-government could become some sort of a basis for improving the transparency. Not just that they're going to release it to the open because of the e-government, but also the data will also be in the format of open data. So it will be in machine-readable format, and also can be easily duplicated, replicated as well to the public, and everyone can use it.
But I guess before he can do that, he must ensure that people can easily get access to the internet and Wi-Fi.
That is one of the major
challenges.
One of the major challenges. Yeah, but I think the e-government is not just something that requires only the internet, but it's basically a system so that everything is recorded automatically. And how it was going to be and how it is going to be presented to the public is something that needs to be assessed by the government. For example, in places like Papua, where there's internet penetration is actually quite low, e-government could actually make the system for the officials to do the whole system of budgeting, but they could print it out and then put them in public places with easy readings. Format, like for example using local language, or not using any technical budget terms, because Indonesian technical budget terms is amazingly complex.
I think probably in all over Southeast Asia. Probably in all over Southeast Asia.
Yeah, but it's our government have a sort of like tendency of using alphabet soup. It's like there's always some sort of an acronym for every single budget account. So
I think probably Malaysia would have the same experience. We have too many acronyms as well. Not that I'm complaining. Another area that I'm just quite curious. Just how you said that using simple languages to convey the right messages in terms of how the government is spending or planning for its budget. Is the government of Indonesia really, I would say, they really want to push forward for citizens' budget to create the awareness between the government and the public?
Yeah, that's what we're focusing on. I think a lot of NGOs would prefer to have a citizens' budget because.
Do we have?
Well, yeah, it is. If you check out the Ministry of Finance, there's a huge amount of database or infographic on the current government's budget. And ever since 2012, the government always released the the budget draft and also when it was enacted, sort of like a very summary of of the budget. You could be calling it citizens' budget
But the funny thing
at
is,
at the national newspaper.
yeah, the funny thing is, when I was discussing about budget 2015 for the Malaysian government that was being released also a couple of months ago, no one actually ever even heard of what is citizens' budget. So this is quite something that Malaysia can learn from Indonesia, especially Malaysian government, providing simplified information, but still the same kind of message in terms of government's expenditure and budget planning. For citizens' budget, if there's one thing that Malaysian government or Malaysian public or even Malaysian civil society can learn in terms of creating this awareness, so people are more empowered to talk about budget, because to some budget is an economist sort of realm, is not really their realm, but actually it impacts their life. How can Malaysian learn from Indonesia in this sense, or even the whole of Southeast Asia can learn from Indonesia?
Yes, so the citizens' budget is actually one of the most important tools because most of the public do not read the budget documents. The budget documents is important for NGOs on trying to scrutinize the budget, and also for academicians when they make research on budget. But the citizens' budget could help improve discussion during the budget, especially during the budget drafting. However, if you have a citizens' budget, it has to be released not too late. For example, if you because it's going to be shown to the public should be made input for the citizens' budget, and there has to be time available for the public to accept that, to give input to the government, and the government also reporting about that. One of the key important things that Indonesia is successful of is that they make abundant of sort of like different types of infographics, and to checking out what exactly the types of infographic that's sort of like useful for Indonesian public. They're sort of like responding that people will immediately understand if they see it. They make experiment with they make experiments with the pie chart. They make experiments with bar chart. So though that's important for the government to do.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, we are at the end of our session today, and thanks for sharing your views, and all the best for Indonesia's budget transparency, and of course for the whole of Southeast Asia as well. Thank you, Uki.
Yes, and thank you very much to the and ASEAN staff. And since tomorrow is Christmas, I'm going to say Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Oh, thanks.
For everyone to celebrate.